All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of variables, like how to use them. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of what's going on, like how to use them, that we can really understand. We're also be covering what's going on behind the scenes that we can really understand. So how do we use variables in Java? How variables work? Remember, how do we use variables in Java? We have to figure out how does Java want us to. Remember, we're using Java, so we have to figure out how does Java want us to. So there's three things that we have to specify. One, we have to provide the name of the variable. So there's three things that we have to provide. We have to provide the variable type, provide the name of the variable. We also have to provide the value that we want to store in the variable. And we also have to provide the value that we want to store in. One thing to note is there's two different variable types. One thing to note is there's two different variable types. We're going to cover the reference primitive type and then a reference type. We're going to cover the reference types and how those work. So for primitive type variables, there are four. For primitive type variables, you're going to use these. There are four. Yeah, you're going to use these. Yeah, you're just going to use these. You're going to enter. You're going to use these. So one is you're just going to use these. And int means integer. So one is, remember in our example, we were storing our calculations in an integer. So if you remember in our example, we were storing our calculations in an integer. So like 1, 2, integers are whole numbers. 5 twice, but it's like 1, 2, and then you can see the example that kind of mirrors what we did. It's a whole number. And then you can see the example that kind of mirrors what we did. Okay, we want to make a variable. Previous example, integer type. So that's int. We want to make a variable. That's how Java. Integer type. So that's int. The rules for Java. That's how Java. And then the name of the variable. Again, here it's item Java store, and then the name of the variable value here it's item. So we do that store, and then we want to store the value 10, and so we do that. The other variable type is double, and if we have a variable, the other variable type that means that the variables, if we have a variable type of double, that means that the variables can be holding positive or negative decimal numbers. These can be positive or negative decimal numbers. The other variable type is character type. And the other variable type is character type. And a variable of a character type is just single character, right? Like the letters of the alphabet. So that's just single characters. Those can be lowercase. The letters of the alphabet, essentially. And then those one important thing about the character type is you can see that one important thing about the character type is you can see that. So in Java, that's how we have a single quote. And so in Java, that's how we have store in the character variable. Specify the value that we want to store in the character variable. It has to be that single quote of Java. It can't. That's how Java wants us to do it. And then the last variable type. That's how Java wants us to do it. Is and then the last variable type. Those are primitive. Is variables that hold either true. Those are or false. Variables that hold either true or false. And you can see the example there. All right, so let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes with primitive type variables. This is important because actually primitive type variables, from a behind the scenes behavior perspective, they function differently than reference type variables. And I'm gonna talk about the behavior of reference type variables in the future. So right now we're focusing on primitive types. And then for anybody who's taking like an AP Computer Science course or an intro to programming and you're using Java, you're probably going to be tested on understanding what's going on behind the scenes and being able to know the difference between primitive types and reference types. All right, so let's get into the example. Now, let's say that we're creating a integer and it's x, and we want it to store 5. So what's going on behind the scenes is Java is going to create a space in memory, and then in that space in memory, it's going to store the value 5. So whenever we use x, what Java is doing is it knows that x has a space in memory, and it goes to that space in memory and pulls out what's in there. In our case, it's 5, and so x, whenever we use x, it's going to be using 5. If we in the future change x to equal 10, then Java is going to go to wherever 5 is stored, or wherever x, the place in memory for x, and it's going to change that value to 10. There could be a scenario where we create a new variable. So let's say we want to create a variable y and we want it to equal x. So what Java is going to do is it's going to create a new space for y, and it's going to look at what's in x. It looks in x and it knows that 5 is in x. And then in our space that it created for y, it's going to put 5 in that space. So they're both going to be equaling y, but they all have their they all have their separate spaces with the value 5. So this is what's going on behind the scenes, and like I said, it's important because it's different than reference type variables or how reference type variables work.